What's it like working with Asmon? What's it like working with SODAPOPPIN? Content creators are a double-edged sword. They are your greatest strength and they are your greatest weakness.
Tips, you are choosing the harder path.
The content creator grind, it is so deceptively difficult. When you're working with content creators, you ain't control of ever. You wake up every day, you check Twitter, and just something new happens, and you're like, oh, okay, got to deal with that now. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm done with this.
What was that boiling point?
How much time you got, Eric?
In 2020, top streamers Asmongold, ESFAND, Mizkif announced founding a new content org, OTK. Just 3 years later, OTK makes millions in revenue profitably without outside investment, has expanded beyond content to a gaming PC company, a video game publisher, a talent management arm, and has brought on new top creators like Will Neff, EMIRU, Extra Emily, and more. Their secret? OTK's CEO and co-founder, Tips Out. Tips today shares how OTK has succeeded when other content orgs have failed, how he makes decisions with 7 streamer co-owners, and what Asmongold, ESFAND, EMIRU, and more are really like. And if you enjoy the podcast, we're launching a creator newsletter all about stories like these, industry news, and how to improve as a creator. It's free if you sign up in the next 90 days via the link in the description below. Tips, thanks so much for coming onto the pod.
Thank you for inviting me. Super excited to chat.
OTK itself, it started during COVID, 2020.
Yes, 2020, October.
What was the genesis of, because like, I understand you were friends with ESFAND and with Asmon, but there's so many directions that could have taken besides let's start a company.
Why did we start OTK?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, it's amazing, but I mean, so much stress and work.
ESFAND and I had known each other for a few years before that. We were both content creators that came up right around the same time. We started a podcast together centered around World of Warcraft, specifically the classic version of the game. We were super close. Over the course of that period, we had met Asmon just tangentially. Asmon had come on, done an interview with me on my YouTube channel. And by association, we had met, the other members of the organization. And, we always kind of knew, I think, that we wanted to work together more intimately. We just didn't really know how, and we didn't know how to align the incentives. Because in the Twitch streaming world, it's very much a zero-sum game at times where if you're live and somebody else is live, the viewers only have one option to go to. In, I think, June or July of 2020, the industry went through a pretty major tectonic shift. That opened up an opportunity for me and ESFAND to, look at new options and see what we wanted to do in the space. And, some of the ideas that we had discussed over the years, came to the forefront. And, we were talking, hey, should we do something? Should we make an organization? Which is a very loose term in the gaming space. And I remember just being on Twitter and, talking to Asmon and just, hey, man, if you want to do something, I'm happy to work with you on it. And he was like, it's funny you mentioned that, Tips, because if I wanted to do anything, you're the first person I would hit up because I don't want to do the work and I need somebody to do the work for me. So lo and behold, Asmon kind of gets the crew together. He's our guiding light, our star that we kind of revolve around. And he assembled the Avengers and he said, all right, guys, Tips, you handle all the work. We'll do the streaming. Let's do something. And lo and behold, OTK was formed.
When you start working with somebody professionally, even if they're a friend, I feel like you always learn a lot more about them. How has your relationship with ESFAND changed? What have you learned about him since? ESFAND
is a genuinely good guy. And in streaming, you don't meet a lot of people like that. It's a fraction of the entertainment business that's known to be a very cutthroat, competitive environment. And most, entertainers, on-screen entertainers, from my personal experience, tend to be very, just competitive and not people I would bring home for dinner, believe it or not. But ESFAND is just one of those guys that, hey, man, like, come hang out, come meet my parents. I want to introduce you to my family, like, just because it's a closer relationship, So that's probably the biggest thing I learned about ESFAND is, yes, he's a streamer. Yes, he has that competitive nature, just like, every other content creator. But, when push comes to shove, when the rubber hits the road, he's just a good dude. And I was really, really happy to learn that about him.
When do you remember seeing him like, oh, like, I actually see him as a friend?
Yeah. So I actually remember it pretty vividly. We were at his house in the early stages of OTK. That's where our base of operations was. And a bunch of people were over, just like congratulating us on the announcement. And, just a bunch of people wanted to collab and stuff like that. And he was standing in a group. And personally, I was kind of, on the outside of the group, because I'm not a content creator anymore, and I'm kind of a reserved guy in general when it comes to the talent side of the business. I like to work with the talent I know, and I tend to stay away from talent I don't know. So he just kind of looked over and saw me, and he was like, "Yo, tips," and kind of pulled me into the circle and,
Wow.
Engaged and kind of put me in that conversation. And that means a lot. He didn't have to do that. Regardless of whether or not I wanted him to do that, it was like, he's considerate enough to kind of look around him and say, "Oh, you know what? That guy over there, let's bring him in, let's engage, let's get him involved." And just little small things like that, I think, define someone's character. So that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, like ESFAND's not just a tunnel vision, get me more viewers person. He is a, genuine guy.
Now that at OTK, you're COO, where you work with your friends, have there been times where you felt frustration because you have to balance what you'd want to just do and hang versus what's business? And how do you handle and manage that?
How much time you got, Eric? I mean, it's funny, like we joked a while back about getting one of those signs that you put on like construction sites of like days without incident, and just like using a permanent Sharpie to just write 0, because there's 0 days that we go without incidents. But content creators, and I think even more so streamers, are interesting because they're always working. Whether they are live or offline, their mind is so dead set on, what can I be doing to grow my platform? How can I optimize my shorts production? How can I, leverage my long form to produce, mid-form VOD content? And those wheels never really stop turning. So when you're trying to balance a new business model on top of their existing business, if the incentives are not aligned to where they're getting their personal wins as well as the business wins, that's where you run into a lot of conflicts. So with an organization like OTK, where we were very fortunate in that the business grew relatively quickly, we were approached with like an immediate conundrum of, hey guys, you guys have personal businesses, which are great, but this thing is like growing way beyond what any of us expected. It needs more time. And that shift in allocation, that shift in priority, to this day, results in frustration. And the way we usually handle it is, oh man, I can go on a rant about this, but the way we handle it personally is we tend to be far more flexible on the OTK side. So I think where a lot of other businesses, I see a lot of esports organizations try to develop creator programs, or, there's other, content organizations out there that try to, succeed in the space, and they oftentimes end up collapsing because I think the pre-existing structure of their organization takes precedent over the creators. And if that is your perspective, you are never going to find success. Creators will always prioritize their pre-existing platforms, and you have to respect that. These are businesses they've been cultivating for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, regardless of what, the financial prospect is of your new business. That's just something so near and dear to them that you have to be flexible on your end. With every, obligation that we set forth towards a creator, we try to make sure that, hey, it's accommodating your schedule, or it's completely symbiotic to what you're already doing, so that, it benefits you on your personal business as well.
I mean, look at Faze, for instance, which went public and didn't really work out, partially because they brought in layers of executives that hadn't come from the space and tried to slot creators in as basically units of content. You mentioned part of this awareness is, with streamers, they're always thinking, they're driven. What can I do that's going to continue growing me? What were you like as a streamer? Was that your mindset as well?
Yes, I think it was. I think, one of my earliest conversations with ESFAND, this was like a month or two after I started making YouTube videos. We were brainstorming the podcast, and, we were talking about our long-term goals, and both of us were, infants in the streaming space at the time. And I hadn't even started streaming, actually. I was still a YouTuber.
Wow.
For me, my background comes from construction and engineering. And, this was a very, gaming was like a very divergent path for me. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure, to go into it with is mindset of, hey, I'm doing this because I need to succeed. I mean, I was married at the time. We had just returned to the US. So, it was important for me to enter it with, hey, this is like my passion. I love watching gaming content, But at the same time, I have to pay my bills. And I knew that I needed to have some kind of business plan because other people depended on me to succeed.
So I'm imagining you come back to the States.
Yeah.
You turn to your wife. Have you had your baby at this point?
Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet. So what was that conversation like?
Hey, babe, can you sit down for a second? I got to talk to you about something. I don't know if this was if it was this way when you were growing up. Early on, gaming still hadn't had that, the explosion that it has today. And specifically online gaming, specifically online PC gaming like World of Warcraft. Mm-hmm. If you were playing World of Warcraft in 2005, chances are that it was probably something you didn't open a conversation.
You're a nerd.
Yeah, exactly. So, naturally, I just kind of developed that guarded habit of, hey, I don't open up with, hey, I'm in gaming, right? Or I'm a gamer, so to speak. Gaming content is just something I consumed, but I tried not to divulge too much about it and my obsession with it. So it's funny. I was talking to my wife and I was like, hey, this gaming thing, it's a little bit more than just a hobby for me.
It's an obsession.
Yes. Yes. When you wake up at 1 a.m., you don't see me next to you. I'm on the computer gaming. Yeah, something like that. But just kind of explaining to her that, hey, this is a new industry. It molds my passion and hopefully I can, leverage whatever I've learned in my current field and utilize it there. But I want to take this chance. It's probably the last time I'll be able to. I was 27 at the time. We were really looking to lay our roots, at that point after we came back to the States. And I just told her, hey, babe, I just asked you to trust me. And she looked me in the eye and she said, babe, I trust you. Go for it. She didn't really know. Who knew? Even in 2017, the scene had developed a little bit by that point, but who knew that it could become what it has become post-COVID? And she believed in me. She would help me make, my early thumbnails on YouTube and give me ideas for titles and stuff like that.
So say the first 3 months where you're now a content creator, how much are you making? Hi there. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to hear more creator stories like these, or you're a creator looking to level up and improve, or you just want to track everything happening in the news that affects you, like is TikTok being banned or not, I'm launching a newsletter that's all about creators and free for the next 90 days if you sign up via link below. Now back to the podcast. So say the first 3 months where you're now a content creator, how much are you making?
Oh man, early on, you're making... Okay, early on, I've been involved in a number of different startups from college. I was in the construction industry for a number of years, but the content creator grind, I have so much respect for it because it is so deceptively difficult. Just the mental that you go through of hey, one video did well, my next video didn't do so well. Oh my God, am I dying? What's going on? What's my next video going to be like? And really, you're only as good as your last, 30 days of content, basically. It takes a toll. So if I remember correctly, I didn't monetize my first, video until maybe a month and a half in. I did have some early success, but the most I ever made in a month on YouTube, from YouTube itself, maybe $4,000.
That's insane.
Yeah.
With a wife.
Yeah.
Let's talk about mental for a moment because I feel the same way when I'm putting out videos.
Yes.
It feels like life or death, whether it does well.
Yeah.
It rationally makes no sense, but something about the immediate gratification of making a piece of content, which in a positive way is very creative and fulfilling, it gets hijacked immediately because did people like it? Do they not? So how did you survive that until you started to get some hits?
The novelty of the experience and the realization that I was finally getting an opportunity to pursue my passion carried the first year. So yeah, I remember I was still working a full-time job. I was driving an hour and a half to job sites, and stuff like that, an hour and a half back every day. And I would come back into the office after hours, just working on, editing content and stuff like that. So, it was really just the idea that, hey, this dream that I've had since 2010, watching Total Biscuit's old YouTube videos, is finally a reality. And I really just have this one shot, one opportunity, get that Eminem song playing. But no, that's what carried it for me. It was the novelty of the experience, the satisfaction of finally being able to pursue something I really wanted to do, as well as the desperation of, hey, if this doesn't work out, it's not just me, right? I'm not a 19-year-old college kid anymore where it's I'll go back to my studies or whatever. It's, hey, I got people I'm responsible for. So those three things really helped me get over it. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that it did hit a boiling point for me. There's a reason why I'm not creating content to this day is at some point, the volatility gets to you. And that's when I started to expand into like tournament organizing for like World of Warcraft and eventually going into OTK. It was like I was able to diversify my revenue streams. I realized that, the business of content creation, especially on the back end, can be far more lucrative than just making the content itself. And there's a lot more stability that comes with that. So,
what was that boiling point?
I started my channel around World of Warcraft Classic. I was just such a huge fan of this game. Blizzard had changed World of Warcraft so much over the years. Cataclysm, so many expansions. I felt like the game had lost what it was. And so now you have this game coming back that I was anticipating for years, even before I got into content creation. They finally do it, and then the game finally launches. And at that point, I'm like knee deep in content creation, and I just end up like despising the launch. Because it was work at that point. It wasn't, hey, I get to like enjoy this thing that I've been waiting 15 years to come back or whatever. It was, all right, man, launch day. What's your game plan? What's your content schedule like? What videos you're going to do? Plan out your content week, 2 weeks, etc. And like for the first 2-3 weeks after launch, I just remember being totally miserable. And this event that like I was anticipating for like literally probably like 4 or 5 years up until that point was just like, it just didn't deliver for me.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that, this is no longer a passion for me. This is strictly a job on the creation side. And if it is strictly a job, I just don't feel like it's worth enduring the volatility. I'm done with this shit. Let me take control of my destiny. I always had that North Star of, hey, there will be a business opportunity that will come up. And if there's a good opportunity, I'm going to take it.
Do you feel in control of your destiny now?
When you're working with content creators, you ain't control ever. Generally speaking, especially where OTK is now, the stability of our P&L is it's much more stable than it was when I was a singular content creator. We expanded into CPG like Starforge Systems or system integrator. We founded Mythic Talent management company last year, and we most recently announced the launch of our influencer-led publishing company, Mad Mushroom. So those in tandem with, a lot of new OTK-owned IP that we've spun up over the past few years, just more stable and recurring content slates, definitely feel more secure. But with creators, again, it's like you wake up every day, you check Twitter, and just something new happens. And you're like, oh, okay, got to deal with that now. So there's never that like 9 to 5 feeling, which doesn't really exist in startups anyway, but it will never be 100% like, oh, dude, everything's stable, because at the end of the day, entertainment is entertainment, and it comes in all shapes and sizes.
You run a massive company. You aren't just working with streamers and producing content. You spun out the management company. You spun out a game publishing company, a PC building one. You also an investor. You invest for Andreessen Horowitz. So the scope of all of these things, my first question is now, right in this moment, are you happy?
Are we going to therapy sessions?
We can, yeah. I mean it. Are you?
I mean, I think business satisfaction-wise, yes, 100%. I mean, I can't imagine myself doing anything else right now. I was very fortunate, like the DNA at OTK, from just like our content creators to the team, and just the opportunities that sprung up that allowed us to spin up, Starforge and Mythic and Mad Mushroom. Like I remember back to the origin days of OTK, just kind of thinking what the business plan could be and where the model was headed. We were expecting by this point, hey, we'd have an established media company, hopefully, and, potentially be getting more into like esports teams and stuff like that. That ended up getting scrapped really early on. And to see where we are now with all these other subsidiary businesses, like Mad Mushroom, for example, it was in our business plan pretty early on, but it was like year 5, to do that. And, in the middle of year 3, when we announced it was satisfying and gratifying, honestly. So yes, from a business satisfaction, standpoint, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm very grateful, and I feel very lucky to be where I am. On the personal side, I'm ecstatic. I'm just very blessed. I've got 2 kids. They're amazing. I'd say that the one thing that keeps me up at night at the end of the day is, as you're probably super well aware, this whole space is going through like a massive transition right now. There are so many, external factors, internal factors that are changing everything. You've got the technology side with things like AI and the entire publishing model, the game publishing model is completely being upended. 35,000 layoffs, up until this point this year. That's the kind of stuff that's always a little nerve-wracking or just like keeps your antennas perked at all times. Yeah. So there's always that baseline level of stress. But in terms of happiness, man, if you ask me, hey, Tips, you could press a button and be doing exactly what you want to do, anywhere you want to do it in the world with who you want to do it, be like, you know what? Keep that button. I think I'm already there.
I love that. I similarly feel existentially happy in doing what I get to do. Similarly, I always wanted to work in gaming. I always wanted to work with creators. Now I get to and do conversations like this and produce content myself. So happy. And it doesn't change. I'm always just like a little scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. It never goes away. Like, what if it doesn't work?
Yep.
And it all goes away. And my life, I don't get to do this anymore. And the people I work with, I let them down too.
Yeah.
Especially to your point, like the past couple of years have been rough. What's really remarkable at OTK is like a lot of these content media orgs are not in the same position of strength as you are. We talked about Faze, like there have been others that have done lots of layoffs. You're here. And you've spun off this initial spark you had with a few friends into an enterprise. I think my next question is, like, what is the dream of where you're heading with OTK?
When we first started, there were other content orgs in the space, albeit, a lot of them centered their business models around, agencies and agency fees. And, getting sponsorships for their creators and taking like 20% cut. There wasn't really anyone in our cohort that we could look to and say, okay, we want to replicate this business model. Like offline TV, incredible group of talent, but they're primarily focused on YouTube. And that just wasn't our strength at the time.
Yeah.
Faze, it's this mixture of esports and lifestyle and hypebeast culture. And, again, just primarily depended on the agency model at the time. And we're just like, we can't replicate that. So early on, I had a deep suspicion that, the traditional kind of sponsorship ad model was not going to sustain our business long term. So from day one, I was thinking about, okay, how can we vertically integrate several subsidiary businesses that can leverage the influence of our creators and hopefully feed back into parent co and the media company where it's like media doesn't need to be running at like a crazy margin. It could be running at break even or even, a little bit of a loss if we wanted it to. Fortunately, we're not there, but it could be. And we just have other verticals that we spin up, and those are, our cash cows, so to speak. The grand vision of OTK has always been cultivate a center of influence through, creators and content, and then channel that influence towards endeavors that most authentically engage with our community and that audience. So a great example is Starforge. I remember when we were spinning up Starforge, a lot of people that, were close to me and advising me at the time were like, hey man, getting into system integration, that's a low margin business. Why would you do this? Like go and try to spin up some kind of like a B2C SaaS or something like that targets your audience. All of which are still in the business plan long term. But at the time I said, look, it's important for us if we're going to be spinning up new companies and diverting our influence to something, the first few we do should embody the needs of our community. And our community are gamers. So if we can come in and deliver a product that makes a direct impact on their life, and make sure that product is best in class, best pricing, et cetera, that is going to, engage the community in a way and foster this trust in us where we can, in the future when we launch other endeavors, they're going to know, hey, this is something that OTK is backing. We know it's going to be a success. We know it's going to give us value. The sky's the limit. Full vertical integration between all our businesses. Starforge, publishing, talent management, media, they all kind of work together in a flywheel and just looking for more ways to broaden that flywheel and serve our community.
Tips, you are choosing the harder path. You could have stayed in agency. You instead, at a moment where, content seems to be working, said, let's construct an entirely new business plan. Let's go build computers. A harder path, because you are inventing a business model that no one's fully done before and that I can't imagine existed when in 2020, you and a few friends said, we really like each other. We should do something to then turn that into an actual functioning flywheel. And all this comes back to what you said. Creators have so much influence, and yet they're their own businesses. They will always think about how to grow themselves. How do you incentivize them to grow an organization? And how can that organization make money outside of just brand deals, outside of just esports, which has not really made money?
Yeah.
What was that conversation like for starting Starforge? Because that was like the first not really content related spin-off business.
Yes. An interesting conversation. So before we started Starforge, we were sponsored by a PC company that no longer exists, Artesian Builds. And the COO at the time, who is now the CEO of Starforge, was a gentleman named Nicholas Dankner. I got along with Nick pretty much day one. We just had this great, camaraderie and, very, very easy person to talk to, just a good guy all around. And eventually he actually left Artesian, and we just kind of kept in touch lightly, over time. And the thing about, PCs is, especially system integration, is technically speaking, you're not manufacturing anything unique per se. Like we don't make our own graphics cards. We don't make our own, components and stuff like that. Not yet, at least. But there are still plenty of opportunities to distinguish yourself from others in the space. Your warranty, your customer service, your cable management, your build quality, your ability to deliver, your packaging, your even, the way you assemble your PCs, like making sure that you're taking thermals into consideration and all that stuff. So the conversation basically started with me and Nick. I kind of floated it by him because he was looking for transitionary job and stuff like that. And I said, hey, our contract with Artesian is pretty much done at this point. And how would you feel about potentially consulting us or helping us do something similar? Our audience needs PCs. We've got a big audience. Can we make a business model work here? And he was very enthusiastic at the prospect. So made my conversation with the guys much easier when I said, hey guys, look, brand dollars, sponsorship dollars are volatile, as you can see. One day you've got a $5 million crypto deal, in your face, and the next day, you're going 3 months without a major partnership. We have to smooth out our revenue and, enable ourselves to forecast our business longer term. So honestly, their response was, computers? Yeah, let's do it. Does that mean we get the NVIDIA cards before everybody else? Yeah? Okay, let's do it. Let's do, yeah, exactly. And credit to our founding team and just the guys in general, all of our co-owners, they're very enthusiastic. I think definitely outliers on like the content creator spectrum of like taking risk and tackling new projects. And for them, it's like, you know what? If it sounds cool and, tips, we're trusting you to make sure you keep us above board. If those two things are good, then let's do it.
I'm sensing this common theme, not just around making hard choices, around just following your passion and following the people you care about.
Yes.
And I'm hearing with Starforge, you're like, well, I really like the guy, Nick, and I think he could run this and he could do this. I heard you mention that you could even do content at a loss, which you don't. That is profitable. So is OTK profitable overall?
Yes. And we have zero debt as well.
Amazing.
Hell yeah. And we're not VC backed.
Even more incredible. As a VC backed business, we give up a lot of agency and control over our own destiny as soon as we take that money, because it becomes an obligation to do something as opposed to what you've done. So follow-up question, OTK as an org, are you making more than $1 million, $5 million, $10 million?
No comment. I will say this. I think at this stage in our business, we are very fortunate in that we are above board, no debt, no VC money. We have full control of our destiny.
Yeah.
But we're also very enthusiastic about expanding. At the end of next year, I'll have probably a more interesting answer for you, but we'll see. But for now, it's, hey, we made a good chunk of money this year. Let's invest into publishing games. Let's invest into backing studios, etc. So that's kind of where we are.
Which blows my mind because so many companies and organizations in this space are not profitable right now, let alone having the testicular fortitude to then reinvest in other areas. So you've talked a little bit about Starforge. Talk to me a little bit about, okay, what'd that look like for Mythic? What'd that look like for becoming a game publisher. And by the way, you're publishing a game soon, Atomic Picnic.
Hell yeah, Atomic Picnic.
That is absolutely nutty. How did those two conversations happen? And at this point, are your co-owners just used to it? They're just like, here's tips. What are we going to do next? How are we going to take over the world today?
I always had a suspicion that the sponsor model just wasn't working. Just being in the space, I mean, talking to other people from different organizations, you just hear that, oh man, these guys are losing like 10 mil a year and these guys are in the hole for God knows what. And, just hearing so many rumors about organizations being subsidized by like platform contracts. And so I was like, dude, none of that is sustainable. There's no way that's going to last. So a lot of these projects, again, like the seeds of the ideas were introduced to the entire team early on.
Wow.
In terms of, game publishing specifically, I'll do that one first. Before even we were talking about Starforge, the dream was, hey, we are gamers and our audience is a bunch of gamers.
Yeah.
We should make a video game. It was a very naive and juvenile thought, but at the same time, it made sense, at least intuitively. What we were to find out, over the course of that diligence period was game development in and of itself is really, really, really hard. And it's one of the few industries where tenure in the space does not necessarily mean you are able to ship a good quality game. You look at successes like Palworld recently. You look at successes like Vampire Survivors, Among Us, Lethal Company. All these different indie phenoms that have taken place over the past year or two. A lot of those were developed by like studios of like 1 to 5 people, and some of them started developing games during COVID, and they just kind of picked it up and ran with it. So it's an interesting space where, just because you've been in game dev for 10, 15, 20 years, and all the game devs are going to hate me for saying this, but it's not like being a doctor for 10, 15, 20 years or an engineer for 10, 15, 20 years where, yes, you accumulate, skill set, you learn, you evolve, you grow, but the end product that you make, there's so much more that goes into it beyond your developing skill. Probably the number one cause of game studios failing has nothing to do with their skills as developers. It's the business side. It's, hey, are you able to raise money, do your seed, Series A, B, C, D, for the course of 3 to 5 years and finally ship your product? That's a huge challenge in and of itself. So we realized early on that game dev was way more complex, way more difficult than we realized, And so it was like, okay, well, we're not going to tackle a competence that we just don't feel comfortable with. Let's lean into the marketing side. Let's lean into what we're good at: marketing, promotion, community building, engagement. And that's, after a few conversations with some trusted advisors, one in particular really kind of encouraged me, hey, Tips, game dev is freaking hard, man. But publishing, here are some ways that you guys could potentially make a huge breakthrough.
I'm curious, how do you handle making decisions with how many co-owners do you have? 5, 6?
I think we're at 7 now.
You're at 7 co-owners. Even my co-founder and myself, when we try and figure out what to do, we go to co-founder therapy.
Yeah.
It's like couples therapy.
Yeah.
But you work with each other. How do you make decisions? What do you do if someone disagrees? How do you handle that?
It's obviously challenging. Everyone has their own opinion on the direction that the business should take. Everyone has different passions and interests and, different opinions on which content creator should we sign next and what our merch should look like and, even what new business we should start up. So in that environment, where I've personally found success is it starts in day one. The most important thing, in my opinion, when you get into business with somebody is you need to establish a layer of trust. You should already have one when you're going into business. I mean, you're getting married to somebody basically, but early on, you need to be able to deliver in the capacity of your role quickly and often. And if you can do that, you've empowered your team to trust back in you. And I think that was very, very important early on, where a lot of us, we were friends in the space. I worked with ESFAND on a podcast, but none of us had, endeavored to build, a multimedia empire together. So for me, it was really important, and this is just part of my DNA in general, is work very hard, show results, and just prove yourself out. And early on, it was, I think, apparent by my actions with the rest of the team that, okay, Tips, he doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
He's not experienced in the gaming space, right? None of us were at the time. But at the very least, we can trust him to work his butt off and get us wins. We'll take some L's in the meantime too, but he's going to get us wins. So that was a big part of the process because, fast forwarding to today, our decision-making process is obviously everyone, brings forth ideas and suggestions and, everyone is, still open to giving their opinions, but it's very much my responsibility to derive from little comments, brought forth in the meeting from creators, what they're looking for and what they think will work best. And then kind of processing that, doing my diligence, researching different business models and coming up with a strategy that I then present back to them in like one of 2 or 3 configurations. We're gamers. We're big fans of the roguelike genre. You got 3 options, guys. What do you think? And it's not 3 of my options. I'm the CEO right now, but really the strategy comes from the creators, whether they realize it or not. It's just me processing the information they give me throughout our meetings, throughout conversations, one-on-one, et cetera, and kind of analyzing that, saying, okay, this is what Asmon wants, this is what ESFAND wants, this is what Nick wants. If we do this, it gives them all 3 of their wins, and we can leverage, the audience, all 3 of their communities, et cetera. This is the path forward. So that's kind of how we come up with decisions. And then I just do that, 3 times, present 3 options, and we kind of vote on it.
That sounds incredibly hard.
yeah. It's a lot of conversation. I've always said when people have asked me, hey, like, what's it like working with content creators? Like, this is like one of the biggest questions I ask. What's it like working with Asmon Gold? What's it like working with SODAPOPPIN? Content creators are a double-edged sword. They are your greatest strength and they are your greatest weakness. But that weakness can be mollified tremendously if you just talk to them. Talk to them, listen to them. You don't talk, you shut up, you just listen. Ask them questions. Hey, what do you like? Hey, what are you up to? How are things going at home? Anything you need support with? I saw your stream today, man. It was hilarious how this moment happened, whatever. Just get them talking. And if you do that long enough over a course of time, you'll start to get to know them on an intimate level. You start to get to know what they want, what motivates them. What are their goals long-term and, their interests and their hobbies and what gets them to do that, Twitter post that they don't really want to do. And, once you learn enough about them, you can start, it's like when you get married, right? You can start completing your wife's sentence, your significant other's sentences. You get to that point on the business side where I don't need to know now, like I don't need to have a 2-hour conversation with ESFAND about, this next business venture I have in mind because I've already had those conversations. I know he's going to like this because, we've been speaking hours a week, for the past 3.5, 4 years.
You've always developed the internal simulation versions where you can take ideas and be like, what is internal simulated Miz thing? What is internal ESFAND thing? When it comes to building that team of creators, some of whom become co-owners, so you've recently signed Will Neff. You brought on Extra Emily when she was relatively early in her work as a creator. Are you the one deciding talent to bring on as well?
If the guys listen to this podcast, there will be many disputes, of my answer, but this is the true answer, okay? When it comes to talent, I will say this, it has to be unanimous. We will never bring someone on, even if six of the owners say yes, one says no, it's a no. We simply cannot compromise our group dynamic or our culture, especially on the ownership level. We're just so close now. We're friends, we're business owners, we're more than that. We're shoulders to lean on, personal, professional, et cetera. So whenever we do, suggest to bring somebody on, yes, it has to accomplish our business perspective, our business goals, but at the same time, it can't compromise our group dynamic. So in terms of the individuals, I will say this, I was very bullish on Extra Emily. I was very bullish on, actually Nick, originally, he actually was not one of the original co-founders of OTK. We signed him before we launched officially, but he was not one of the co-founders. Super bullish on Nick, super bullish on Soda. Basically, there's been some instances where there's been dispute, but I don't think I can give credit to any individual, including myself, as to who's the person that says, hey, we should bring this person on, because ultimately we decide that as a group.
How do you figure out the next step? So EMIRU, Emily, for example, was brought initially as a creator, then she became a co-owner. What's that discussion look like?
She impressed us early on. I remember very shortly after she was signed as a talent, she suggested to me, hey, we should do a game jam, and as like a content piece. And, she explained her rationale. And at the time we were planning the first Games Expo. I was like, it's funny you say that because we're thinking in the same line of thinking. We're planning to do a Games Expo, not exactly a game jam, but, accomplishes similar goals. And, could constantly see that she was going the extra mile, thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, wanted to participate in decision-making on content, even though technically, that was something reserved for the ownership roles. And it's very rare to come across a content creator who is an entrepreneur first and a content creator second. And I could tell early on, and I say we as a team could tell early on that Emmy had, more ambition than just streaming whatever hours a day. She wanted to do more creative things. She wanted to put on shows, events. From an ethos standpoint, it's always been important for us, for the owners of the business, to be the creators themselves. And I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of other organizations. We're completely influencer-led. In some ways, we're influencer-operated. Like, you'd be surprised at some of the mundane tasks that some of our owners do. And that's just part of how much they're bought into the business, how they want to be involved. So the primary qualification is, are you a creator, or do you at least understand creators on an intimate level? Emmy, she's obviously a creator. And then it comes down to, do you think the way, we think, or at least in the ways you think differently, are they supplemental or complementary to our overall strategy? If the answer is yes, then it's, can we trust you? Are you someone we can bring into the enclave and discuss very intimate things with, beyond our business? Like, a lot of our business meetings, we're discussing some personal things, and we're very much a family. We open up to each other. We talk to each other about our problems. So with Emmy, it was early on, we identified that she did have that entrepreneurial spirit. Her values were very much in line and in parallel with our values, and that she was somebody that, beyond, just being a content creator or signed talent, was somebody we could trust, was somebody that could come in and join the family. And that's when we extended the ownership offer to her.
So I love that. I also appreciate your point on, you'd be surprised at how influencer operated you are. I know Asmon used to work for the IRS. Yeah. I just picture him in a back office, doing OTK's taxes and just saying tips. What the did we spend money on? I don't know if that's happening or not.
Oh my God.
I also like your point on how the bonds you build, they become deep and personal. My co-founder and myself, I think I know him, and he knows me probably more than anyone else. That's maybe literally family. I've been with him now through 4, 5 girlfriends.
Yeah.
And I once had a discussion with him. We were in co-founder therapy. I was like, hey, when we started this, I'd say we were best friends. Are we still best friends? Because, we disagree a lot too. It changes when there's money involved. And he was like, I don't know. And I felt so hurt.
Yeah.
And then later he explained more. He's like, is my sister my friend? I don't know.
Yeah.
But she's my sister.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's what we are. It's different, but it's very close in its own way. You've talked a lot about how they felt they could trust you because of how hard you work. When was the first moment that you felt similarly toward them? Oh, this isn't just a group of friends. We're going to film a little content group collab thing. Oh, I can rely on them as well. This is going to be a business.
It was one of our early meetings. We were planning a content piece, specifically the Race to World First for World of Warcraft. This is an event that takes place once or twice a year. All of the top World of Warcraft guilds come together and try to kill the end boss of a raid tier as quickly as possible. That's the quick and dirty of it. And no time before had there been a Race to World First that was administered, probably not the right term, but produced by a non-competing guild. Up until that point, every Race to World First event was just put on by the guilds that were participating in that event. And usually each guild hosts their own version of that event. We had the idea of, hey, why don't we try to come in as a neutral third party and cast an event that featured, the top 10 guilds simultaneously, rather than just, focus coverage on a singular guild, singular team. And that project in and of itself, it was our first major production, super ambitious, never been done before. We didn't even have a freaking production team at the time. Okay, let's put on this massive production for 100,000 plus CCV event. We don't have budget because we just started and we're bootstrapped. We don't have experience running anything in this scale. and we got to get 10 guilds to buy in on the vision. Because for them, from their perspective, it's like, why would I let you guys take my footage and my content when we're hosting our own event and we want people to watch our stream? And so tackling that was like super difficult. And on the back end, we were able to secure the partnerships with the guilds. We were able to set up the production and everything like that. But the talent were not very keen on like rehearsing. They didn't understand the concept of rehearsal. These guys are improv geniuses. They come on stream, turn on their stream, entertaining for 10 hours, and just goes, right? So it's like, what do you mean rehearsal? What do you mean I got to come 3 days before and every day stay here for hours? I got to stream, man. I got to make YouTube videos. I got to do my thing. So I remember going into the race, I was really nervous. It was a 8 or 9 day production. Every day, different segments, different little events, guest appearances, etc. And we never rehearsed a thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. Day one rolls. Asmon's on the couch. One of our other owners at the time is on the couch. I think we bring a guest that day. And man, you would think they had been doing this for years. I would say that first day of that Race to World First in 2020, December 2020, was probably the most entertaining esports event I had ever seen.
Wow.
It was so good. And they just killed it, man. And then the next day, day two, we had, I think at the time, Maya came on and was doing like an animal segment, talking about different animals and stuff. And it was killer. And like, they just killed it, man, for like 7 days, whatever it was, of just improv performances, one after the other. And I was like, okay, so long as I do my job and my team does its job behind the scenes, the guys are going to take care of the rest. And fortunately, that was December of 2020, just 2 months after we started. So once, for me, it was very early to trust them on screen, like from that day forward.
I'm sensing so much excitement as you're talking. Yeah. You're replaying in your mind.
I remember.
I'm like, oh my gosh, they haven't rehearsed. Asmon comes on. It's great.
Yes.
This is going to work.
I'll tell you, like the sigh of relief was just like, oh, thank God, man. Like it would have been an embarrassment on every level. We had 150,000 people watching live, CCV. And it was this huge event. And if it went poorly, it would have been disastrous. And funny enough, the one hiccup that happened was my fault. There was a really intense moment happening, and I was just so into the race. I was like, like Asmon just had me enthralled, and the guilds had me enthralled. And a guild was coming up on a boss kill, and it was like at 2%, 1%, and they wipe at like point something percent, whatever it was. And I was so into it that I jumped. I was like, no, and I jumped. And my leg hits the power cable to the PC, shuts off, stream dies, everything's dead. We got to plug the computer back in, refire up the stream. It was a disaster. But it's just sometimes things like that happen in production. But it was just funny. I was so stressed out about how the guys were going to perform. It was very humbling to be like, Tips, you're no freaking rocket scientist here. You got to keep yourself in check too.
How did they take it when you accidentally cut off power and the stream's completely shut down?
It was a massive joke. It's a meme to this day. Wow. For like everyone on the production team and the owners and stuff. It's like, man, Tips, you really have to jump right there, but it's fun. It's just an internal joke now.
Do they play different roles with you? Like, who in that group have you found yourself most aligned with from a business POV?
Very good question. You mentioned Asmon, working for the IRS. I'll just take a second to talk about Asmon as a person. Asmon is like, in my opinion, he is one of the geniuses of our generation. Like, full stop. He is a brilliant guy. He has demons just like all of us. I wish he'd clean his room. But at the end of the day, like, I just have so much respect for him as a person, how authentic and genuine he is and his brilliance. And he definitely is someone that is able to see the vision. Like on the vision side, he gets where we're going. He got it early on. Even to this day, he'll say something in a meeting where I'm just like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, I hadn't told you this yet, but we're on the same wavelength. So on the vision side, I would definitely say Asmon and also Miz. Miz really understands kind of where this business is headed. And he's grown a lot on that side. I think Miz was always very curious as to like what happened, behind the scenes at OTK. Like, what are you doing, Tips? What are you up to? What are we doing? What are we planning? I think that's resulted in him just learning a lot and gaining a lot of knowledge and experience through my experience, because I also didn't know shit years ago. So I would say definitely Miz and Asmon on the vision side more so. I think ESFAND is fantastic at, number one, he's a team player. He always steps up to the plate when we need him to, but he's such a personable guy, and he's very good on like the brand interface side. Like if you need to win over a brand, get ESFAND on the call.
Yeah,
like
he's charming because he's a good dude.
Good dude, charming. And, he's a gamer, but he was also a college football player. He has this like unique perspective of culture from like a lot of different angles.
Wow. And
so he's able to communicate with some of the non-endemics in the space more so than even I can, right?
Yeah.
So, ESFAND very much, on that side. Nick is our gut check. He will break the groupthink immediately. If we're all in a meeting and we're all jazzed up on an idea and we're like, yeah, this is going to be so good. Oh my God. Nick will just be like, guys, that is the biggest load of crap I have ever heard. It's a terrible idea. You guys don't know what you're doing. We're starting from scratch. The reason why that's so powerful is, again, as you accumulate wins, as you see your business model succeeding, as you feel the dopamine rush of 100,000 people telling you how great that event was, you tend to rest on your laurels. You get complacent. You stop thinking outside the box. Nick does not have that complacency mode that like we naturally go into. For him, it's like, nope, job's not done until we get acquired for $5 billion or whatever, right? Like he's got some lofty goal in mind that we're not there yet. So Nick is really good at just kind of breaking that groupthink and keeping us in check. SODAPOPPIN, the biggest surprise to me in OTK, probably in all our years so far, was how great SODAPOPPIN is to work with. I've been watching Chance since like 2013 as like just a fan, a viewer or whatever. And growing up watching him, I mean, this was a guy who would like prank call Blizzard customer support, who was like the ultimate troll, who's essentially in some ways a child actor in the sense that he grew up streaming. Started streaming when he was 15 years old. He never really got a chance to go through like a proper professional career or whatever. So, but to see him be as helpful and insightful and as brilliant as he is, that was a shocker. Like when we brought him on, I was like, okay, Chance can help us with like X, Y, and Z, but he's also been helping us with like A, B, and C, right? So super amazing. And Emmy is spectacular in so many ways. She's someone of few words, but the words she does say are always like super productive and like move us in the right direction, basically.
There's clearly a lot of love you're sharing as you talk through the members, and you've really shared the great moments you've laughed. I have another sensitive question. Have you ever cried in front of each other?
Yeah, I did once. I broke down once. I won't get into the details, but in startups, you go through tough times.
Yeah, I've 100% cried in front of my co-founder as well. Yeah. And to me, that's like the ultimate, typically I don't want to, but that's like the ultimate sign, like, I'm trusting you.
Yes.
Please don't take a giant dump on me.
100%. It's super hard to be vulnerable, man. Like, especially in business and when stakes are so high and stuff. Startup land is freaking, it's crazy. Like, I don't know what, 80% of startups just flat out fail, whatever it is.
Usually because of co-founder disputes, actually. That's why I'm asking this.
Yep. And some days you're just not going to see eye to eye. And some days someone is going to do something really, really stupid. And it could be against the wishes of the group, whatever it is. When the stress of kicking off a business is already so high, when kind of the macroeconomics of the industry is changing, when you have pressure to deliver a business model that is debt-free, that is not venture capital backed, you will hit these kind of boiling points of like, hey, dude, if someone just like touches me right now, I'm going to freak out. If someone just pokes me, I'm going to freak out. And it was one of those moments where, things were hitting a fever pitch on the business side, and then something external happens. And I was just like, I broke down. I was like, oh my God. And this was in front of everybody. It was in front of a few of our co-founders. And, they were great about it. Like nobody
Wow.
nobody brings that. Nobody makes me feel like, it was like a moment of weakness.
Because it's not. To share something like that is a sign of strength. Like, here's how much I trust you to share this side of myself, rather than manifest as anger or something very different.
Exactly. And it's good to get that stuff out there too. Like there's just a lot of pressure in business, man. And if you don't have an outlet, dude, it can be really, really tough.
My last question. So to your point, I remember someone asked, I believe it was the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. They're like, hey, imagine you like time travel 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you meet yourself in your 20s. What would you tell them? And he said, don't do it. You've worked so hard to put this life together. Where does this come from? Like young tips, like a 10-year-old, 15-year-old, were you already holding in these big dreams and plans? Or is this something that developed over time? Like, why do you do all of this?
My dad emigrated to the States in 1979 from Syria. And, at the time he was fleeing a lot of problems in the country. When he came to this country, he had to, it's like the classic rags to riches immigrant story. He had to kind of pull himself up by his bootstraps or whatever and work hard. And, eventually he did. He started his own business. He succeeded. He brought over his brother, my uncle, his parents, his uncles, aunts, and really established himself and helped everyone around him. And that communal responsibility is something that I've definitely taken from him and from my mom. And they're both incredibly hard workers, and they have been our whole lives. My mom gave her entire life for me and my siblings. She was in medical school at the time. She got married, dropped everything, immediately became pregnant with my oldest sister, and really just had to raise us. And we're a bunch of kids, and she had one after the other. So growing up and seeing that, and not just seeing it, but having it be called to my attention. I remember somebody, in our community once just told me, hey, you need to be very thankful for your parents. You don't understand yet what they're doing and how hard they're working, but this is something you really have to be grateful for. And having that call to my attention at a young age, and just watching my dad at work, watching my mom raise us and make the sacrifices that she's made. One thing that they've instilled in me is that the goal of life is not to make money for yourself, or even the goal of business is not to make money for yourself. You are here with a purpose, and your purpose is to elevate your community, to make sure you have a connection with the people around you, with your faith, with your background, with your culture. Don't give any of that up. And I think one of the biggest motivators for me is my job is not done until I can, at the very least, replicate the impact that the generation before me had. And I think you take that and you combine it with passion for gaming in the gaming industry, and with ADHD. And specifically, I was also lucky to kind of understand, a little bit of how my ADHD functions and channel it in ways that, allow me to start up with multiple businesses and oversee like 7 P&Ls simultaneously and stuff. So I think those three things, and obviously an incredible support team at OTK, an incredible support team at all of our subsidiary businesses, incredible co-founders. That's what keeps me going. If I want to end off on something on my note, it's everything we have accomplished. We've put a blood, sweat, and tears, but also I truly believe this is like divine intervention or something. We are lucky. Like the stars aligned for OTK. A lot of people come to me in the space from other organizations and, startups looking for advisement, creator collectives, et cetera. And they ask me, hey, what should we do? How did you become successful? Flip out a coin and just, I flip it. I say, yeah, that's what it was. Like the stars aligned, the intangible makeup was just perfect. We all happened to be WoW gamers, and we all happened to kind of be from that same cohort and have these loose affiliations with each other and see the world the same way. And just by coincidence, a funny anecdote, Finn, our camera guy, who's like now our director of photography, he's a genius, right? He just happened to be childhood friends with ESFAND, and he just happened to be helping ESFAND with some stuff at the time OTK came around, and he happened to come up to me and ask me, hey, Tibbs, can I give a shot at, filming the Nick video? And just because we didn't have any money at the time, I was like, you know what, we'll spare some cash. Sure, Finn, go ahead. All of a sudden, he's like this freaking secret photography genius we didn't know about. And just a multitude of these serendipitous micro events and circumstances that came together, and just it worked, man. It's like freaking the primordial soup produced the amino acids, like that's what it was.
Thank you so much, man, for making time. This was amazing.
Appreciate it.